Welcome back to the Patrick Reagan Show here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and locally on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. In this last segment, I want to talk about an issue that comes up every holiday season. We see stories over and over about all the people who are going hungry during this time of the year. I guess no one cares about what happens to these same people after the holidays. Apparently, it doesn't sell newspapers or advertising on news broadcasts during the rest of the year. No, but every holiday season we get all of these stories about how the poor people aren't going to have a Christmas and how the rich are all fighting over whatever is the new craze this season, new whatever toy it is. With that in mind, I want you to consider this question. Why do we penalize productivity? Why do we penalize people getting ahead? We don't try to hurt healthy people so that the handicapped and sick don't feel less than adequate. No, we try to pull up the people with disabilities so they can be part of a society as well. But when it comes to successful people, our government seems to think it's advantageous to penalize them through higher taxes and instilling this hatred against that group of people. In no other parts of life does this happen except in taxation. Even though it's been demonstrated over and over that through taxing an activity, you get less of it. This really shouldn't need to be studied because it's common sense. If the more money you make, the bigger percentage of your income you owe to the government, then what is certain to happen? The rich don't make money at the expense of the poor. Although if you listen to President Obama and quite a few people in Congress, you would think this is true. Economic development is positive. It isn't a zero-sum game. Someone doesn't have to lose for someone to win. A rising tide does indeed lift all boats. The reason government hates this type of argument is because it takes them out of the equation. People who want to control your life don't want you able to provide for yourself. They don't want your boat being lifted by economic activity. They want your boat being lifted by government. After all, if you aren't dependent on them for your living, then how can they control your life? The answer is they can't. So government is going to fight anything that moves you more towards independence. For those of you screaming at the radio that I'm wrong, only ask that you consider the poor in this country versus the poor in other less developed nations or countries. I've said it before on the show. We don't have poor people in this country. We have people who don't have as much money as others, but that doesn't make them poor. The Census Bureau has reported over the years that 30 million people in America are classified as living in poverty. But if poverty means lacking nutritious food and warm housing and clothing for a family, then we don't have that many poor people. The poorest Americans today live a better life than all the richest people 100 years ago. The typical household defined as poor by the government has a car, air conditioning, 2-color televisions, cable or satellite TV, a DVD player, and a VCR. And if there's children in the home, they more than likely have a game system like Xbox or PlayStation. This isn't some pro-capitalism foundation making these statements. It's the United States government, the Census Bureau. The poor households also had a refrigerator, an oven, a stove, and a microwave. Also, a lot of them had clothes washers, clothes dryers, ceiling fans, cordless phone, coffee maker. Now, not every poor family has all these items, but a large percentage of them do. Again, not according to me, according to the United States Census Bureau. They also reported that the home of the typical poor family was not overcrowded and was in good repair. In fact, the typical poor American has more living space than the average European. The typical poor American family was also able to obtain medical care when needed. And by their own report, the typical family was not hungry and had sufficient funds during the past year to meet all their essential needs. Again, not me saying that. In that case, the family was making that statement to the Census Bureau. I'll read it again in case you missed it. The typical family was not hungry and had sufficient funds during the past year to make it meet all essential needs. According to the government, poor families reported struggling to make ends meet But in most cases, they were struggling, and this is what they're saying. The family reported they were struggling to pay for air conditioning and cable TV, as well as to put food on the table. Some 70% of poor households reported during the course of the past year they were able to meet, quote, all essential expenses, which included mortgage, rent, utility bills, and important medical care. Only 13% of poor households report that a family member needed to go to a doctor or hospital at some point in the prior year, but were unable to because the family could not afford the cost. The government is not only violating the Constitution, and thus the law, by taking money from one citizen to pay the bills of another, it's wasting it as well. We will always have people who don't have as much as someone else. That's a fact of life. What the government wants to do is make sure everyone gets 10 pieces of candy, even if it has to steal 6 pieces from someone else to do it. And stealing is never the right thing to do. Doubly so if a government is doing it in a supposedly free country. That's why I say private charities are the way to go. Private charities allow you to help people. Government forces you to give money through taxes to give to someone else. Private charities don't do that. It's up to you if you want to give or not. While you're thinking of that, though, another important thing to keep in mind is a lot of how these charitable organizations, they use the money you're giving them. This is why I say go to charitynavigator.org. Charitynavigator, that's all together, .org, and you can check on the charity you're giving money to. On that site, you can go look for a copy of the IRS Form 990. That lists where your money goes when you give it to a particular charity. Now, some charities aren't big enough to require filing of this document, but most do it anyway. And if you want a copy of one, you can call the charity too, and they can mail you one. But the reason I ask you this is some charities don't pay their people anything. 100% of the money you donate goes towards helping the people who use their services. But some charities pay their people a salary, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But you need to check on how much that salary is and the median income in the county in which they're located. If people in that particular charity are raking in 2 to 3 times the median income, then I'd probably look somewhere else to donate. The deal you make for working for a nonprofit is that you'll generally make less than the private sector. That's the deal. Because all the money you make, every bit of money they're paying you, is not going to help the people your charity's supposed to be helping. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't get paid, but you should look at that pay in the context of where they're working. All right, we're up on the last of the show here. If you want more information about us, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Patrick Reagan Show. Also, you can go to hear our archives at youtube.com/Patrick Reagan Show. And then you can also email us, patrickreaganshow@gmail.com. Or if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, just drop a card or letter to the WOKI studios. Remember, liberty begins with you in your mind. Join me next Saturday afternoon at 4, where we'll be fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.
Read dozens of books about heroes and crooks, and I learned much.
Join us again next week for a solid dose of truth on the Patrick Reagan Show. Be there.